All right, and welcome back to the forecast card. Pretty much a juice loss day. Went 2-2-1. Really should have been 3-2, but we'll get to that later. First game, Wichita State, I would say relatively non-sweat. They choked at some points, but uh, they were winning, I'd say, 30% of that game. They ended up winning outright, which is pretty cool, as 8-point dogs win by 5. Sacred Heart, pretty bullshit game. I really only liked Sacred Heart because I thought they would hit a lot of threes at home. They shot 16%. Um, yeah, just pretty pathetic all around game from them. They had more turnovers, they had fewer rebounds, and they had a significantly worse shooting percentage. So just one of those games. Really expected them to hit more threes. I think in my write up I said they were gonna shoot 10 to 11 threes, make 10, 11 threes, and they made 4. So they only got 12 points and they lost by 7. Um, yeah, I'm not sure if that was a bad pick or just unlucky in how terrible these people were shooting from 3, especially their star players. But it is what it is. So Ohio State, that one was basically neck and neck for pretty much the entire game. I think Michigan was always kind of leading. Um, yeah, Ohio State just got completely dominated on the boards. More than I expected. Obviously, Michigan's got the 2 big 7-footers, but they got out rebounded 46-31, which gave Michigan an additional 7 field goal attempts. Michigan also shot better from the line, and turnover wise, Ohio State had 9, Michigan had 12, so not as big of a gap there as I would have hoped. But yeah, the home edge didn't really give them too much, as Michigan shot about 50%, so they ended up losing that game by 3. St. John's, for like 35% of that game, it looked like it was pretty much neck and neck the entire time. St. John's kind of pulled away in the end, and then with about 9 seconds after going up 8 in the free throws, Creighton shoots a garbage time layup to push this game. So very lucky I got -6 and not -6.5. Otherwise, that would have been extremely tilting. But it is what it is. And Maryland, very sweaty in the first half. Iowa could not miss a shot, and then obviously Maryland completely crushed Iowa in the second half, winning that game by 25. So 2-2-1. We take what we can get. Sundays are typically really bad days for me, so if I can take basically an even day, I'll take it every day of the week. So let's look on to the games I like for Monday. All right, and moving on to the first game, we have Jackson State head on the road to play Bethune Cookman. Now, I don't particularly love this spot, but the model does like Bethune Cookman to win by 4. I have these teams pretty much equal. I think Jackson State has played a bit better competition, but Bethune has a bit more of baseline better coaching. Yeah, this Jackson State team on the road has been significantly worse than they have been at home, and now we're getting this Bethune team in a revenge spot. If you look at these two teams, they played back in end of January, about 3 weeks ago, where Bethune Cookman lost 86-81 to Jackson State. And now we're getting them off they just lost a home game to Alcorn, so we're getting them in a good bounce back spot. Jackson State just lost their first road game by 5 to a really bad Florida A&M team. It's like all the stars are lining up. We're getting Bethune Cookman at home where they play better, Jackson State on the road where they play worse. We're getting a revenge game and a bounce back game for Cookman and Jackson State. Typically, bounce back games don't necessarily carry over onto the second away game of a slate. So, yeah, I think Bethune can keep this game close. It really, when you're betting on these kind of dog shit teams, you never really know what you're gonna get. And Jackson State, they have been playing on paper really good as of lately. If you look at their last 5-game power rating, but again, anytime you have Mississippi Valley State in your last 3, it's going to inflate the hell out of your last 5 stats. So I'm not really putting any value to that. Overall, I do think Bethune Cookman is the slightly better team. We're getting them at home. Yeah, give me Bethune Cookman. I'm just going to take them on the money line, but you could also take them on the 1.5 spread. I just prefer to take money line because I always get hooked by these stupid 1.5 lines. Heading on to game number 2, we have Morgan State head on the road to play NC Central. Now, on paper, I think NC Central is the much better team, both offensively and defensively, even though both these teams are really bad defensively. But at home, NC Central has been a really solid team. And Morgan State, they're not necessarily a terrible team, but they're a team that relies heavily on the mid-range shot. And even though NC Central doesn't really defend the mid-range very well, I just, again, you'll hear it from me all the time. I think it's a really shitty shot to take. And I think they're not going to hit them as often on the road, especially in this NC Central home environment that has been pretty solid. Now, on paper, I think NC Central is going to find a lot of success, especially from three, where they're almost a top 100 three-point shooting team. They're going to get to the line a lot because Morgan State does foul a ton. They're going to get a lot of offensive boards, a lot of points off steals. And Morgan State, I really only see them getting, they'll probably also get to the line, but they do shoot the free throws significantly worse than NC Central. And yeah, they'll get some offensive boards too, but not nearly as many as NC Central will. Not only that, but this is another bounce back spot for this NC Central team. These two teams played not too long ago, early January, and this was a game where NC Central put up 98 points and lost, which is pretty crazy. They went on the road, put up 98 points, but Morgan State put up 102. They just shot ridiculously well. I don't see that happening again. NC Central, they're coming off a solid win. Obviously, Cookman State's not a good team, but Morgan State has lost 2 games on their last on this road trip in a row, both being pretty bad losses. And NC Central, we're getting them in a revenge spot here at home. If you look at their power ratings, NC Central, when playing at home, moves from a borderline top 300 team to a top 200 team. Meanwhile, Morgan State moves to basically a bottom 10 team in all of college basketball when they're playing on the road. They really rely on that home court advantage to hit their shots. So yeah, in this situation, I think we're getting NC Central in a really good spot. Morgan State has won the last 3 matchups, both in 2024 and this last one, despite being a dog in every single one. I think this is a prime spot to back the much better team. I think they're gonna find some success and win this game by double digits. So give me NC Central here. All right, heading on to game number 3, we have Delaware State on the road versus Norfolk State. Now, on paper, Norfolk is the better team, realistically on both sides of the ball, but they're really not that incredible of a defensive team, especially where Delaware State typically has found success. These two teams played earlier in the year in Delaware's court, where Norfolk actually beat them by 9. I really like these revenge spots lately, especially as we get closer to the season. I've seen a pretty significant trend where the second matchup between 2 games is always tighter, especially if the team that lost the last one is a dog. So I think they can keep this game within the 9.5 number, even though it is going to be at home for Norfolk, where they have been playing better, and on the road, where Delaware State hasn't necessarily been playing that great. Delaware State has covered more often on the road than Norfolk has covered at home. Both these teams are on a 5-game winning streak. Delaware State has had some pretty solid games lately, beating a Howard team by 21 points. Obviously, they haven't really played that many good teams, but they beat South Carolina State, a borderline top 200 team. They kept it pretty close against a lot of teams. I think they're a bit underrated offensively. If you look at the matchup here, this is a Delaware State team that typically likes to shoot a lot of mid-range shots. Again, I know it's not a shot I love to take, but this is against something Norfolk doesn't defend well. But more importantly, and this is something that didn't really exist in the previous matchup where I didn't like Jackson State shooting mid-range shots, or Morgan State rather, is that Delaware State's going to have a lot of success on the offensive glass. This is a Norfolk team ranked outside the top 200. It's a Delaware State team that is ranked in the top 50 in offensive second chance opportunity percentage. They get a lot of points off steals. They're going to get to the line a little bit. On the other side, Norfolk probably won't struggle too much to score. They're going to get to the line a ton. They're going to also shoot a lot of mid-range shots. But I think they can keep up. This is a Delaware State team that's been really consistent. They're playing really well lately. Norfolk also been playing well, but they've also played a couple mediocre teams. We're getting a Delaware State team that is kind of not desperate for a win, but they won 6 of their last 7. They're playing their best they've played all year. You could arguably say the same for Norfolk. But again, Norfolk lost to Morgan State early in January by 4. So it's a team that Delaware State just beat recently. So I think matchup-wise, I think they're going to have a chance here. I think they are going to play with a lot of heat. This has been a team that has been covering a ton of games this year, especially for me. On the road, they're 9-5 against the spread. At home, Norfolk's only 4-3, 3-3 as home favorites. So I think we're backing the better team in conference, who's 6-2. I think they can keep this game close enough to cover the 9.5 in the revenge spot here. All right, and heading on to the fourth game that I like for tomorrow is going to actually be Kansas State on the road versus Utah. Now, this Kansas State team has been kind of a wagon lately. They started out a little bit rough. They had some, rough losses in the neutral court games. They got crushed by St. John's, crushed by Drake, crushed by Wichita State. And then after they had one win over Cincy, they lost another bunch of games. But they've had such a tough schedule. And since mid-January, they have been arguably one of the best teams in college basketball, beating West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Arizona State, Kansas, and Arizona all in a row, which is insane. On the other side, Utah, they really haven't been that good of a team. The best team that they have beat is a team that they beat 2 nights ago with Kansas. So this is, in my opinion, a prime letdown spot for Utah and a prime get-right spot for Kansas State, where they finally had a kind of a bad game against a good opponent. Obviously, Utah has been a really good team at home, but they're not, unbeatable at home. Texas Tech at home crushed them. They got, BYU almost beat them while they were playing at home. They lost to Baylor at home. Obviously, they had some good wins at home as well. But this is a Kansas team that beat Iowa State and Arizona State on the road. And again, even though they had a 6-loss streak before their 6-win streak, they kept those games close. They lost TCU by 1. Obviously, they got crushed by Houston, but then they kept Texas Tech within 4, Kansas within 10, Baylor within 8. I think this Kansas State team is straight up just the better team. Overall, they have all the momentum coming into this game. I think Utah is going to struggle against this team. They kind of do match up decently well because Kansas State is a team that does like to play in the paint a lot, and Utah is the second best paint defense team in college basketball. But I think Kansas State's going to find a lot of success from outside the arc, and they're going to get a decent amount of points off steals here against a Utah team that might be playing a bit sloppier in this letdown angle. So, give me Kansas State here. I'm just going to take them at plus 2.5. I think the line's moved to plus 2, just with me gathering all this information. I'd still take it at plus 2, but at that point, you might as well just take it on the money line. So, that would be game number 4 that I like for tomorrow. All right, now looking at game number 5, we have Arizona heading on the road to play Baylor. Now, this Baylor team looked really bad to start the year, but as of lately, they've looked like a pretty solid team, especially at home, where they're basically a top 10 team. And this Arizona team on the road has been borderline outside of the top 20. They really do rely on that home edge, similar to Baylor does. And if you look at their last 5 ratings, obviously Arizona has still been elite, but this is a Baylor team that's finally made it back into the top 25 conversation. Now we're getting them in a pretty solid spot here at home. Now, Arizona's kind of going into a bit of a skid. They just had to play a really awkward schedule where they had to go home, away, home, and now they're going back on the road. Super awkward. While Baylor has got to play, just came off a really big win against West Virginia at home. They're going to be well rested in their own beds, while this Arizona team's been jumping around everywhere. Probably in a bit of a rut after some tough losses against Houston and Kansas State. I think this is a phenomenal spot. We're getting a revenge angle here too against Arizona, who crushed them on their own home court by 11. So we're getting a lot of solid angles here. You could argue that Arizona is due for a bounce back, but it's just too awkward of a schedule. It's going to be their 4th game in a little over 2 weeks, in like 10 days, where they've had to go home, away, home, away. And now they're traveling, another 800 miles here from home to play Baylor. And when they've had to travel similar distances, they've had some pretty rough games. Meanwhile, Baylor, the last 4 games, they've beaten teams at home. They beat Kansas, they beat Kansas State, they beat UCF, they beat West Virginia. And I do think they match up really well against this Arizona team. Obviously, Arizona has one of the best defenses in college basketball, so you don't really find that they're going to have a significant edge anywhere in the paint. But I think Baylor is going to find a little bit of success here, especially from the mid-range. And I think they're going to get some points off steals, despite this Arizona team, especially on the road, has been a lot more susceptible to turning the ball over. In Arizona, this is a team that is probably going to find a lot of success in the paint. Maybe you'll get to the line quite a lot. But I think this home edge here and the positional gives it way too much of an advantage to Baylor. I think if you look at the advanced stats, Baylor has played a harder schedule and they've really been struggling as of lately. They're due for some positive regression, while Arizona is due for, I wouldn't say a ton of negative regression, but shot quality suggests they should only be 14-11, and Baylor on the other side should be 16-8. So we're getting the better team at a really good price at home against an Arizona team that's been on a terrible schedule, and we're getting Baylor in a revenge spot. Yeah, give me Baylor here at home to win this game outright. All right, now in terms of the 4 games that I kind of looked at, but I couldn't pull the trigger on, Virginia has been playing really good basketball lately. I wouldn't say really good basketball, but they've been keeping games close compared to how they played at the beginning of the season. But this Duke team, no matter the team or the line, it seems like they always cover these fat lines more than any other of these elite top 10 teams. So I don't really feel comfortable laying anything with Virginia. I have, based off the I think 4 model-wise, I have Duke winning by like 16, but in some models I have them only winning by 12 because of the positional spot. So might end up touching that game if it drops to like 12.5, but probably not going to touch it otherwise. On the other side, Arkansas Pine Bluff. Again, I'm not betting this game because they're one of the worst teams in college basketball. Like I just don't want to watch it. I'm not going to put money just for the sake of it. But at plus 2.5, this is an Alabama A&M team that is not really that good either. And we're getting Arkansas Pine Bluff at home where they play much better in a revenge spot. I don't know. I'm not touching it, but model does think Arkansas Pine Bluff wins this game outright. We're getting them at plus 2.5. So if you're a sicko, go ahead, but I'm not touching that shit. UMez Howard, another revenge spot. This game was about similarly matched last time they played. Howard has been in a rut lately. They've looked terrible. UMass is not being good. They're a team that is also in the borderline Arkansas Pine Bluff category, but model does think this should be an 11-point game, so 13.5 has some value if you're a sicko, as I said. And UTRGV, I just been betting this team too much, and I think their value is starting to dwindle. It's one of those games where I always have them as being like 3 or 4 points above whatever the spread is. And this is one of the games I'm not going to touch, mostly because Incarnate Word is still a team that's due for a lot of statistical regression back to the mean, where they've been underperforming to start the year. But I do think UTRGV probably wins this game by 4 or 5, but I don't buy it. I think the Model Mez went 1-1 yesterday, and the Maybes went 2-0. So, not bad overall. Those are the 5 games I'm going to be betting for college basketball tomorrow. Not a really pretty slate at all. Similar to the Sunday slate. I'm hoping, I haven't really looked at it, but hopefully Tuesday, Wednesday looks a little bit nicer. Yeah, if you have any questions or want any opinions on any games, comment down below, and I will see you guys tomorrow.